Lauren Miller gripped the steering wheel of her old Honda Civic, her eyes squinting through the misty rain that blanketed the quiet suburban streets. The faint glow of streetlights reflected off the wet pavement, casting a dim, almost dreamlike haze over the road ahead. It was late, far later than she'd planned to leave the school. Another long day of grading papers, organizing lesson plans, and staying late to help a struggling student had left her drained. But exhaustion was a familiar companion for Lauren, one she'd learned to live with. At 28, Lauren was a dedicated elementary school teacher in a small town just outside of Atlanta. Her days were spent juggling the needs of her students, many of whom came from underprivileged backgrounds. She poured her heart into her work, often staying late to tutor kids who couldn't afford extra help or organizing after-school programs to keep them off the streets. But her passion came at a cost. Between her modest teacher's salary and the mounting debt left behind by her late mother's medical bills, Lauren was barely scraping by. As she drove home that night, her mind wandered to the growing list of problems she couldn't seem to solve. The after-school program she'd worked so hard to build was on the verge of shutting down due to lack of funding. She'd tried everything, bake sales, car washes, even crowdfunding, but the money just wasn't enough. And now, with the school board threatening to cut the program entirely, Lauren felt like she was running out of time. Little did she know, a chance encounter on this rainy night would change everything. The rain picked up, drumming steadily against the windshield as Lauren turned onto a quieter stretch of road. The streetlights were sparse here, and the darkness seemed to press in on her little car. She tightened her grip on the wheel, her tired eyes scanning the road ahead. That's when she saw it. A car pulled over to the side, its hazard lights blinking faintly through the rain. For a moment, Lauren hesitated. It was late, the road was deserted, and she'd heard enough cautionary tales to know the risks of stopping for strangers. But as she slowed down, she caught a glimpse of someone crouched by the car, struggling with what looked like a flat tire. The figure was soaked, their jacket clinging to them as they fumbled with a tire iron. She couldn't just drive past. With a sigh, Lauren pulled over a few feet behind the car and grabbed her umbrella from the passenger seat. The cold rain hit her immediately as she stepped out, soaking through her shoes and chilling her to the bone. She approached cautiously, her voice raised to be heard over the downpour. "Hey, do you need some help?" she called out. The man stood up, startled, and turned to face her. He looked to be in his mid-30s, his dark hair plastered to his forehead from the rain. His clothes were simple jeans, a jacket, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He hesitated before answering, his voice low and polite. "I'm fine, thank you. The tire's just stuck." Lauren stepped closer, her teacher instincts kicking in. "It doesn't look like you're fine. Let me help. I've got tools in my trunk." The man shook his head. "I don't want to trouble you. You're already soaked." "It's no trouble," Lauren insisted, flashing a warm smile. "I'm used to helping people. It's kind of my job." Before he could protest further, she was already heading back to her car to grab her tire iron. When she returned, the man watched her carefully, as if unsure what to make of her. Together they worked to loosen the stubborn lug nut and replace the flat tire with the spare. Despite the cold and the rain, Lauren kept up a cheerful tone, cracking small jokes to lighten the mood. When they were done, the man straightened up and extended a hand. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done without your help. I'm Ethan, by the way." "Lauren," she replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm but reserved, and she noticed the faint calluses on his palm. "Drive safe, Ethan. And if that spare gives you trouble, any shop in town should be able to help." Ethan nodded, his expression unreadable. "Thank you again. You didn't have to stop, but you did. That means a lot." As Lauren climbed back into her car, she glanced in the rearview mirror. Ethan was still standing there, watching her taillights fade into the rain. She couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was more than just a random roadside favor. The next morning, Lauren sat at her small kitchen table, staring at the stack of bills that had been piling up for weeks. The rain from the night before had cleared, leaving a pale sunlight streaming through the window, but it did little to lift her spirits. She sipped her coffee, lukewarm and bitter, as her eyes scanned the overdue notices. Rent, utilities, the lingering medical debt from her mother's treatments. It all felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. Her phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts. It was a text from her colleague and closest friend, Rachel. Meeting with the school board today at 3. They're finalizing the budget cuts. Fingers crossed. Lauren sighed, setting the phone down. The after-school program she'd spent years building was hanging by a thread. It wasn't just a place for kids to do homework or play games. It was a lifeline for so many of her students. For some, it was the only place they could get a hot meal or feel safe after school. Losing it would mean losing a part of herself, too. She glanced at the clock. There was still time before her first class, so she grabbed her bag and headed out the door. Her car rattled to life, the engine groaning in protest as she pulled out of the driveway. The drive to school was short, but her mind raced the entire way. She thought about the bake sales and car washes she'd organized, the countless hours she'd spent trying to raise money. It was never enough. The school board wanted results, and Lauren was running out of ways to deliver them. By the time she arrived at the school, the hallways were already buzzing with the chatter of students. She forced a smile as she greeted them, her worries temporarily pushed aside. Teaching was the one thing that always grounded her, no matter how chaotic her life felt. In her classroom, she was in control. She could make a difference, even if it was just for a few hours a day. After her last class, Lauren headed to the small room where she ran the after-school program. A handful of kids were already there, working on puzzles or flipping through books. She smiled as she watched them, her heart swelling with pride. These were the moments that made all the stress and sleepless nights worth it. "Miss Miller?" A small voice pulled her from her thoughts. She turned to see Mia, one of her third graders, clutching a crumpled piece of paper. "I made this for you." Lauren unfolded the paper to reveal a drawing of herself, standing in front of a chalkboard, surrounded by smiling kids. At the bottom, in shaky handwriting, Mia had written, "Thank you for helping us." Tears pricked at Lauren's eyes as she knelt down to hug the little girl. "Thank you, Mia. This is beautiful." But as the kids packed up and left for the day, the weight of reality crept back in. The program's funding was set to run out in less than a month. Without a miracle, this room would be empty, and these kids would have nowhere to go. That evening, Lauren sat at her desk, scrolling through her laptop in search of grant opportunities or local sponsors. Her mind drifted back to the man she'd helped the night before, Ethan. He'd seemed kind, almost out of place in his quiet politeness. She wondered what his story was, but quickly shook the thought away. She had more pressing things to worry about. Still, as she closed her laptop and prepared for another restless night, she couldn't help but feel that their paths might cross again. A few days later, Lauren found herself at the local diner, a cozy little spot she often visited when she needed a break from cooking or just wanted to clear her head. The smell of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air as she slid into her usual booth by the window. She pulled out her notebook, jotting down ideas for a fundraiser she'd been brainstorming. A charity auction? A community talent show? None of it seemed big enough to make the kind of impact she needed. The bell above the door jingled, and Lauren glanced up out of habit. Her pen froze mid-sentence. Standing there, shaking the rain off his jacket, was Ethan. He looked different this time, cleaner, more put together. His baseball cap was gone, revealing neatly combed dark hair, and his jacket, though simple, looked expensive. He scanned the room, and when his eyes landed on her, a flicker of recognition crossed his face. "Lauren?" he said, walking over to her booth. His voice was warm, almost surprised, as if he hadn't expected to see her again. "Eth?" she replied, equally surprised. "What are you doing here?" He gestured to the counter. "Just grabbing a coffee. I'm in town for a little while, and this place looked inviting." Lauren smiled, motioning for him to sit. "Well, you picked the best spot. Their coffee's great, and the pie's even better." Ethan slid into the seat across from her, his movements calm and deliberate. Up close, she noticed how sharp his features were, strong jawline, piercing eyes. There was something about him that felt different, like he didn't quite belong in this small-town diner. "So," he said, leaning back slightly. "How's life treating you? Still stopping to help strangers on the side of the road?" Lauren laughed softly. "Not lately, but I've been busy enough as it is. Teaching, running an after-school program, trying to keep it from shutting down." She trailed off, realizing she might be oversharing. "Anyway, what about you? What brings you to town?" Ethan hesitated, his gaze dropping to the table for a moment. "Just business," he said vaguely. "I like to keep a low profile." Lauren raised an eyebrow but didn't press. She could tell he wasn't the type to open up easily. Instead, she changed the subject, telling him about the kids and her program and how much they meant to her. Ethan listened intently, his expression thoughtful. "You're really passionate about this," he said after a while. "It's rare to see someone so dedicated." Lauren shrugged, a faint blush creeping into her cheeks. "I just want to make a difference. These kids deserve a chance, you know? But it's hard when the funding isn't there. I've been trying to come up with ways to raise money, but nothing seems to work." Ethan nodded slowly as if turning something over in his mind. "Have you thought about reaching out to local businesses, or maybe someone with connections who could help?" Lauren sighed. "I've tried. Most people are willing to donate a little, but it's not enough to keep the program running long term. I'd need a miracle at this point." Ethan didn't respond right away. Instead, he studied her, his eyes narrowing slightly as if he were trying to figure her out. Finally, he said, "Sometimes miracles come from unexpected places." Lauren chuckled, shaking her head. "Well, if you know where to find one, let me know." They talked for a little while longer, the conversation light and easy, but as Ethan got up to leave, he paused, looking back at her. "Lauren," he said, his tone serious, "don't give up on what you're doing. It's important." And with that, he was gone, leaving Lauren to wonder about the man who seemed to carry more secrets than he let on. The next week was a whirlwind of activity for Lauren. Inspired by her conversation with Ethan, she threw herself into planning a fundraiser for the after-school program. She decided on a community talent show, something fun, inclusive, and hopefully big enough to draw a crowd. She spent her evenings calling local businesses, asking for sponsorships or donations, and her weekends putting up flyers around town. It was exhausting, but for the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. Still, the challenges came fast and hard. Some businesses politely declined her requests, citing their own financial struggles. Others offered small donations, which, while appreciated, weren't enough to make a significant dent in the program's budget. On top of that, the school board had set a hard deadline. If she couldn't raise the necessary funds by the end of the month, the program would be shut down for good. One particularly frustrating afternoon, Lauren sat in her classroom, staring at the spreadsheet she'd been using to track donations. The numbers didn't add up. No matter how many bake sales or car washes she organized, it wouldn't be enough. She buried her face in her hands, fighting back tears. "Miss Miller?" A small voice interrupted her thoughts. She looked up to see Mia, the same third grader who had given her the drawing last week, standing in the doorway. "Hi, Mia," Lauren said, forcing a smile. "What's up?" Mia held out a small jar filled with coins and crumpled dollar bills. "I heard you talking about the program," she said shyly, "so I asked my mom if I could help. This is my allowance." Lauren's heart clenched as she took the jar, her eyes welling up. "Mia, this is so kind of you, but you didn't have to do this." "I want to," Mia said firmly. "You always help us. Now it's our turn to help you." Lauren hugged the little girl tightly, her resolve strengthening. She couldn't let these kids down. No matter how impossible it seemed, she had to find a way to save the program. That evening, as she was leaving the school, she noticed a familiar figure leaning against a sleek black car in the parking lot. Ethan. He straightened up when he saw her, his hands tucked casually into his jacket pockets. "Ethan," Lauren said, surprised, "what are you doing here?" "I was in the area," he said with a small shrug. "Thought I'd check in. How's the fundraiser going?" Lauren sighed, shaking her head. "Not great." "I'm trying," but it feels like I'm fighting a losing battle." Ethan tilted his head, studying her. "You're not the type to give up, though, are you?" "No," she admitted, "but it's hard not to feel like I'm running out of options." He nodded thoughtfully, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "I know someone who might be able to help. He's a friend of mine, owns a few businesses in the area. Tell him I sent you." Lauren hesitated, taking the card. "Why are you doing this?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Because I believe in what you're doing, and because sometimes people just need a little help." She looked down at the card, her heart racing. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a lifeline. "Thank you," she said softly. "Don't mention it," Ethan replied. "Just keep doing what you're doing. The world needs more people like you." As he drove away, Lauren stood in the parking lot, clutching the card like it was a golden ticket. She didn't know much about Ethan, but one thing was clear: he wasn't just some ordinary guy passing through town. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, things were starting to turn around. The talent show fundraiser was finally here. The school gymnasium buzzed with energy as parents, students, and community members filled the seats. Lauren stood near the stage, clipboard in hand, trying to keep everything running smoothly. Kids in costumes darted around, rehearsing their acts one last time, while volunteers set up tables for refreshments and donation jars. It wasn't perfect, but it was coming together, and for the first time in weeks, Lauren felt a flicker of hope. The turnout was better than she'd expected. Local businesses had donated gift cards and small prizes for a raffle, and a few parents had even pitched in to help with decorations. As the first act, a group of fifth graders performing a dance routine took the stage, Lauren allowed herself a small smile. Maybe, just maybe, this would be enough to save the program. Halfway through the evening, as Lauren was helping a nervous student adjust their microphone, she spotted Ethan in the crowd. He was sitting near the back, dressed in his usual understated way, but there was something about his presence that stood out. He caught her eye and gave her a small nod, as if to say, "You've got this." She smiled back, grateful for his quiet support. By the end of the night, the donation jars were full, and the applause from the final act, a heartfelt piano performance by one of her students, still echoed in the gym. Lauren stood at the microphone, thanking everyone for their generosity and support. "This program means the world to me," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "and it means even more to the kids who rely on it. Thank you for helping us keep it alive." As the crowd began to disperse, Lauren stayed behind to help clean up. She was counting the donations when Ethan approached, his hands tucked into his jacket pockets as usual. "Looks like it was a success," he said, glancing at the jars of cash and checks. "It was," Lauren replied, though her voice was tinged with uncertainty. "But I don't know if it's enough. The school board needs a pretty big number to keep the program running." Ethan studied her for a moment, then said, "Come with me. There's something I want to show you." Lauren hesitated, but something in his tone made her follow. He led her outside where his sleek black car was parked. "I promise this will make sense," he said, opening the passenger door for her. Reluctantly, she got in. They drove in silence for a while, the quiet hum of the engine the only sound. Lauren's curiosity grew with every passing mile. Finally, they pulled up to a large, modern building on the edge of town. The sign out front read Montgomery Foundation. Lauren turned to Ethan, confused. "What is this?" Ethan smiled faintly. "It's my family's foundation. We fund education programs, community projects, things like that." Her heart skipped a beat. "Wait, this is yours?" He nodded. "I don't usually talk about it. I prefer to keep a low profile. But after hearing about what you're doing, I knew I had to help." Lauren stared at him, her mind racing. You're a philanthropist?" "Something like that," he said with a small shrug. "My family's business has done well over the years, and I've been using the foundation to give back. I wanted to see if your program was something worth supporting, and after tonight, I'm convinced it is." She felt a mix of emotions, shock, gratitude, even a little anger. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Ethan's expression softened. Because I wanted to see who you really were. And now I know you're someone who doesn't give up, no matter how hard things get. That's the kind of person I want to help. Lauren's eyes filled with tears as the weight of his words sank in. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Ethan replied simply. Let me help you keep this program alive. For the first time in weeks, Lauren felt like she could breathe again. Yes, she whispered. Thank you. The following weeks felt like a whirlwind for Lauren. True to his word, Ethan had mobilized the Montgomery Foundation to step in and save the after-school program. The first step was a meeting with the school board, where Ethan personally presented a proposal to not only fund the program, but expand it. Lauren sat beside him in the small, stuffy conference room, her heart pounding as he spoke with calm authority. This program isn't just about keeping kids busy after school, Ethan said, his voice steady and confident. It's about giving them a safe space, opportunities to grow, and a chance to succeed. And I'm prepared to fully fund it for the next 5 years, with additional resources for tutoring, meals, and extracurricular activities. The room fell silent. Lauren could hardly believe what she was hearing. The board members exchanged glances, clearly stunned. Finally, the superintendent cleared his throat. Mr. Montgomery, this is incredibly generous. We'd be honored to accept your support. Lauren felt tears prick her eyes as she turned to Ethan. He gave her a small, reassuring smile, as if to say, I told you we'd make this work. But Ethan didn't stop there. Over the next few weeks, he worked closely with Lauren to implement the changes. The program received new supplies, updated technology, and even a small library for the kids. Local businesses, inspired by Ethan's involvement, began contributing as well, offering everything from snacks to sports equipment. The community rallied around the program in a way Lauren had never seen before. One afternoon, as Lauren was setting up the new reading corner in the program's room, Ethan stopped by. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her with a faint smile. You've done an amazing job, he said. Lauren looked up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Ethan shrugged. You would have found a way. I just sped things up a little. She laughed softly, shaking her head. You're too modest. For a moment they stood in comfortable silence, the sounds of kids laughing and playing in the background. Then Ethan spoke again, his tone more serious. You know, Lauren, this isn't just about the program. It's about you. You're the reason this works. Your passion, your dedication, it's inspiring. Lauren felt her cheeks flush. I care about these kids. They deserve a chance. And you've given them that, Ethan said. But don't forget to take care of yourself too. You can't pour from an empty cup. His words stayed with her long after he left. For the first time in years, Lauren allowed herself to feel proud not just of what she'd accomplished, but of who she was. The program's grand reopening was held a month later, and it was nothing short of magical. The gymnasium was packed with students, parents, and community members, all there to celebrate the program's new beginning. Lauren stood at the front of the room, her heart swelling as she looked out at the crowd. None of this would have been possible without all of you, she said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. This program isn't just about me or the school, it's about this community, and I'm so grateful to be a part of it. The applause was deafening, and as Lauren stepped off the stage, Ethan was waiting for her. You did it, he said simply. We did it, she corrected, smiling up at him. As the night went on, Lauren couldn't help but feel like she was standing at the start of something new, not just for the program, but for herself. For the first time in a long time, the future felt bright. The weeks following the grand reopening of the after-school program were some of the happiest Lauren had experienced in years. The kids were thriving in their new space, with access to resources she had only dreamed of before. The program now offered tutoring sessions, art classes, and even a small music program. Parents stopped her in the hallways to thank her, and the kids' smiles were brighter than ever. For the first time, Lauren felt like she wasn't just surviving, she was making a real, lasting difference. One afternoon, as she sat in the program's new library, watching a group of kids excitedly pick out books, Ethan walked in. He carried his usual calm confidence, but there was something softer in his expression as he looked around the room. "It's incredible, isn't it?" Lauren said, gesturing to the kids. "This is what I always dreamed of." Ethan nodded, his hands in his pockets. "You made it happen, Lauren. You didn't give up even when it felt impossible." She smiled, her heart full. "I couldn't have done it without you. You gave me the chance to fight for this." Ethan tilted his head, studying her for a moment. "You know, I've worked on a lot of projects, funded a lot of programs, but this one feels different. It feels personal." Lauren looked at him, her voice soft. "Because it is. It's about people. It's about believing in something bigger than yourself." Ethan smiled, a rare, genuine smile that lit up his face. "You're right, and I think I needed to be reminded of that." As the kids ran up to show Lauren their books, Ethan stepped back, watching the scene with quiet admiration. He had come to this small town looking for something he wasn't even sure what, but now he realized he'd found it. For Lauren, the experience had taught her that even in the darkest moments, kindness and determination could light the way. And for Ethan, it was a reminder that sometimes the greatest investments weren't in businesses or stocks, they were in people. As the sun set outside the window, casting a warm glow over the room, Lauren and Ethan shared a look of mutual understanding. Their paths had crossed by chance, but the impact they'd had on each other's lives was anything but accidental. And as the laughter of children filled the air, Lauren knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. Sometimes, life brings people together in the most unexpected ways, and when it does, it's a reminder that kindness, determination, and a little bit of faith can change everything. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one. Thank you so much for watching this story. If you enjoyed it and want to see more heartwarming and inspiring tales, don't forget to hit the like button and share this video with your friends. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to Emma's Stories for more amazing content every week. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us keep bringing you stories that touch the heart. See you in the next one.